What's being aimed at you isn't just hostility. It's the construction of an illusion, carefully staged to distort how others perceive you and how you see yourself. Somewhere out of your line of sight, a blueprint is unfolding, a hidden agenda crafted not out of confusion or envy, but with clinical precision and cold strategy. You're not being whispered about. You're being studied, modeled into a false image and fed into a narrative built to eclipse your truth. But there's a miscalculation buried deep in their plan. What was meant to fragment you only deepens your clarity. While they script shadows around your name, you walk through them without flinching, not because you're untouched, but because you've already endured worse storms and turned them into mirrors that reflect exactly who you are. Their architecture of deceit becomes the ground where your evolution takes root, silently, surely, beyond the reach of their control. Some people believe that if they speak loudly enough, they can redefine who someone is. Behind closed doors, they rehearse scenes where they take center stage as the calm, enlightened figure, while quietly assigning you a role drenched in false emotion and imagined failure. They rewrite moments that never happened, convinced that if the story is told often enough, it will eventually replace the truth. The narrative they've stitched together was never meant to be fair. It was designed to frame their insecurity as wisdom and your silence as proof of guilt. But there are frameworks they've never understood, patterns of reality that respond to integrity, not performance. There are unseen systems in motion that don't answer to noise or theatrics. While they're attempting to control perception through carefully placed innuendos and suggestions, something else is being calibrated in the background, something they never accounted for. Their blueprint is riddled with miscalculations. The gravity they tried to place around their version of the story is beginning to collapse under its own weight. Their strategy was never built to withstand truth. At the root of their design was a fragile need to feel important. And now, the very tactics they used to discredit are being recycled into evidence against them. The more they echo your name in circles of confusion, the more they spotlight their own motives. And without realizing it, they've turned their campaign into a mirror, not of you, but of the very emptiness they tried to hide behind all along. They've turned your name into a marketing tool, one they casually slip into conversations to shape illusions and tilt perception. Each sentence they speak is threaded with subtle cues meant to suggest you're still tethered, still circling the remnants of a connection long dissolved. Behind their public performance is a calculated effort to inflate their own desirability by staging a version of events where you're the lingering shadow, always one step behind, clinging to something that no longer breathes. There's a disturbing precision to the way they've structured their moves. It's not random, it's rehearsed. They've taken time to observe, to catalog your emotional blueprints, to discover where the echoes still ring and exploit them with surgical intent. They lean on intermediaries, well-placed mouths who unknowingly relay fragments back to you, carefully selected for maximum impact. The strategy isn't chaotic, it's tailored, composed like a cold melody designed to stay stuck in the background of your mind. But their entire framework is anchored in a version of you that doesn't inhabit this timeline anymore. They've built their arsenal out of outdated blueprints, fragments of someone who's since disassembled and rebuilt from silence, not noise. And while they keep broadcasting signals to an identity that has already shed its skin, they remain trapped in the very theater they designed. Their war isn't against you, it's against a phantom. They're speaking to a version of you that doesn't hold the controls anymore. While they were rehearsing scenarios and planting emotional traps, something untraceable was happening in silence. The unraveling of your old wiring, the quiet restructuring of who you are. Their whole scheme is anchored to outdated assumptions, chasing an echo that no longer responds. What they think they're attacking is no longer in service. It's already been retired, archived, and replaced with something untouchable. Elsewhere, people are beginning to feel the dissonance in their storytelling. The ones they're trying to recruit into their illusion are noticing the gaps, the mismatched tones, the obsession hiding behind performative detachment. Subtle reactions betray their motives. The more they try to maintain control of the narrative, the more their mask thins, and soon it won't just be doubt surfacing, it'll be recognition. Recognition of the truth that their version of events doesn't match the reality unfolding before anyone's eyes. Because the truth isn't in what they say, it's in what you radiate without speaking. No defensive posturing, no rehearsed rebuttals, just the natural stillness of someone who's no longer haunted. There's a rhythm to your presence now that can't be faked, a calm that fractures every false report spoken in your absence. And while they keep trying to explain why you're supposedly broken, the only thing that keeps breaking is their credibility. They've built a fragile world out of rehearsed impressions, but that illusion is starting to unravel at the edges. The distance between what they perform and what's actually unfolding has grown too wide to ignore. Even those who once listened without questioning are starting to catch the inconsistencies, the unspoken tension between surface charm and underlying obsession. The more effort they invest into maintaining the false version of events, the more obvious it becomes that it doesn't match the landscape around them. Meanwhile, the difference in weight is becoming undeniable. They strain to hold their performance together, while you move through your life with the effortless clarity of someone who no longer needs to defend what's already evident. Without lifting a finger, your presence disrupts their entire illusion. Something ancient has been set in motion without their awareness, a mechanism that returns focus to its origin, that reflects fixation back toward the one who refuses to release it. Each attempt to distort your name bends back toward them with greater force. The accusations they sling start to sound like confessions. Their fixation becomes a window, not into your soul, but into their refusal to evolve. Time is quietly choosing sides now, and the balance they thought they could control is shifting under their feet. They're not just telling stories, they're triggering echoes that won't stop until the truth completes its full return. The moment one believes they're acting in isolation is the same moment their surroundings begin taking silent notes. While they craft rehearsed dialogues and hidden jabs, bystanders are observing something far deeper than words. They're absorbing the quiet contrast between performative noise and lived integrity. Without effort or intention, your calm is educating everyone in range. Not through lectures, but through presence. The kind of presence that leaves imprints long after the moment has passed. The more they posture, the more they unintentionally expose the parts of themselves they wanted to keep hidden. False power always leaks under pressure, and that's exactly what's happening. Their gestures meant to impress are starting to look more like symptoms. But what they can't grasp is that while they remain fixated on maintaining a crumbling illusion, something entirely outside their reach is taking place. A reconstruction is occurring within you, unseen, accelerated, and irreversible. They've become the pressure point that activates the very shift they feared. Their attempts to destabilize are triggering your highest adaptation. Every restrictive move they make becomes a stepping stone to something more expansive. This isn't just survival, it's transmutation. And soon, the entire dynamic will turn in ways they didn't prepare for. Not because of vengeance, but because elevation has a way of making the lies around it collapse under their own weight. They assumed they were scripting a downfall, unaware that the only collapse underway was their own credibility. In their mind, they were casting roles in a drama where you'd play the defeated, the embarrassed, the forgotten. But reality had other plans. They didn't anticipate that the more they tried to box you into a story, the more obvious it became that you'd outgrown every page. What they were really doing was outlining the prelude to their unraveling, and calling it control. The unraveling doesn't arrive with thunder. It creeps in through questions they didn't expect. The ones close to them begin to sense a pattern. Why does a so-called closure carry so much noise? Why does a person who claims to have moved forward still reference the past like a current event? The mask begins to slip not through accusations, but through repetition, the kind that makes even the most loyal listeners start to second-guess what they've been sold. They were hoping to make others believe you were stuck, But it's their fixation that keeps looping. Their name-dropping becomes transparent. Their constant surveillance turns into concern. And slowly, the very people they counted on to uphold the illusion begin to feel uncomfortable. Whispers turn into realizations. Their narrative begins to bleed at the edges, not because anyone attacked it, but because obsession has a tone, and everyone's starting to hear it. The moment their bitterness stopped echoing in private circles and started creeping into your external world, the truth of their obsession became undeniable. What started as whispers has now mutated into strategy. They're no longer content with damaging your image. They've become determined to hinder your future. Their desperation has matured into a calculated mission, one that now revolves entirely around delaying your growth by any means available. This is no longer about opinion. It's about disruption. The deeper you rise, the more threatened they become. They've begun contacting people who barely know you, offering distorted fragments dressed as warnings. They watch from behind locked screens, dissecting your every public move like analysts preparing a report. What they once did out of spite, they now execute out of fear. Fear that you might build something they'll never be part of again. Their behavior now reveals more about their mind than your life. They've crossed from personal spite into organized sabotage. The narrative they've woven has become its own reality, one where they're on a mission to prevent your light from reaching anyone new. But the more they tighten their grip, the more visible their internal collapse becomes. They're not just reacting to your success, they're trying to stop it from existing at all. And that reveals everything. Some individuals feel more secure in your suffering than in their own success. The story they've told about who they are relies on your stagnation, because your healing disrupts the script where they're always ahead, always the one who walked away better off. Every step you take toward wholeness erases a lie they've been nurturing. And your renewed strength doesn't just irritate them, it destabilizes the version of reality they've convinced others, and themselves, was the truth. But this is where their efforts begin to crumble under forces they don't even recognize. They've mistaken your growth as a threat to their pride, not realizing that targeting someone in genuine recovery activates forces far beyond their reach. What they see as a game of image management has triggered unseen protections that surround those aligned with inner truth. Without knowing it, they've moved against something that responds not with retaliation, but with divine correction. The more they push, the faster you rise. Their interference isn't slowing your progress, it's feeding it. Their attempts to trip you up are functioning like weights in training, resistance that strengthens rather than weakens. And while they keep throwing stones in hopes of slowing your momentum, they're unknowingly paving your path forward. What was meant to derail you is now sharpening you, and it's only a matter of time before the results become impossible to ignore. There's a shift unfolding that escapes their awareness entirely, not because it's hidden, but because they're not tuned to the frequency that would allow them to witness it. While they remain stuck in rehearsed roles and fixated cycles, something in your world is blooming. The right souls, the kind that resonate with truth, depth, and inner clarity, are gravitating toward you with quiet certainty. New paths are opening not through force, but through alignment. And without chasing anything, you're being met by everything that was meant for you. The more they obsess over trying to influence perception, the clearer the contrast becomes to everyone paying attention. While they sink into the exhausting routine of surveillance and sabotage, you're planting the real seeds of a future they can't touch. You're investing energy into the present moment, into your craft, your peace, your people. And the result is undeniable. Where they rely on performance, you're producing something that can't be faked, a reality filled with depth, connection, and inner joy. Their illusion is unraveling in real time. The crowd they once counted on to validate their story is beginning to see through the act. There's no need to explain who's still clinging. The evidence speaks for itself. One person is trapped in trying to control the optics. The other is simply living. And in that contrast, the truth becomes impossible to miss. Not because it was shouted, but because it was quietly proven. Their personal connections begin to erode under the weight of what they refuse to release. The obsession that once lived quietly now bleeds into conversations, silences, and interactions meant for new beginnings. How does one create real intimacy when part of their emotional world remains trapped in old conflict? How does one show up fully for someone else when their inner dialogue is still rehearsing battles with someone who's no longer even playing? Eventually, what was supposed to be a new chapter starts to resemble a replay of the last. Social circles that once entertained their story start to grow weary. What began as drama soon becomes a loop, and those who once lent sympathetic ears begin to feel the fatigue of recycled narratives. The same names, the same accusations, the same emotional tone, it all begins to dull. And without realizing it, they lose the room. The spotlight they tried to keep aimed on your supposed failures begins to flicker, not because you said anything, but because everyone watching started asking the same silent question: why can't they let it go? Even more telling is what begins to unravel in their own projects, pursuits, and ideas. The hours they spend obsessing are hours not spent building. The mental space taken up by keeping track of your life is space no longer available for their own creation. Slowly, their results begin to reflect their fixation. Their progress halts. Their momentum dissolves. The same force they tried to weaponize against you becomes a loop they can't escape, and it returns everything they sent out, multiplied and made visible. What they've thrown at you was never just noise, it was a curriculum. Every attack sharpened something ancient within you. Each attempt to corner you only revealed how limitless you really are. And although the path has been brutal, it's built architecture inside you that can't be dismantled. Their pressure wasn't your punishment, it was your forge. And while they were focused on breaking you, they accidentally built someone they can't reach. Truth didn't vanish, it was filtered, buried under layers of distraction and digital fog. But something in you kept pulsing louder than the static. Not because someone handed you answers, but because you refused to forget what you sensed when everything else told you to forget. The script felt wrong, the air felt coded, and you stopped waiting for clarity to be delivered. You started becoming it. That's why you're still moving when so many others shut down, because deep down, you knew this was never just about survival. They're still trying to strike a ghost, locked into narratives that lost their relevance the moment you evolved past the coordinates they memorized. Their attacks land on empty ground, while you're operating from entirely new terrain. Those who once echoed their concerns now feel uneasy. What seemed like storytelling begins to sound like fixation. Their inner circle shrinks as the obsession becomes harder to hide, harder to justify. And while they keep chasing the version of you they thought they destroyed, you're already living as someone they no longer recognize, and never truly knew. There comes a point when even the most convincing performance starts to feel off. The crowd that once nodded along begins to look around, sensing that something doesn't line up. What was once accepted without question now feels rehearsed. The faces that used to echo their narrative start to show doubt, not because you argued, but because truth always outlasts illusion. Slowly, their environment begins to mirror back everything they've been projecting outward. The very outcomes they tried to force onto you begin surfacing in their own world. Disorder surrounds them, not because of misfortune, but because the energy they've been sending has finally found its way home. While they scramble to maintain the illusion, you're outgrowing the need to even respond. What they see as escalation, you experience as distance. They've become a fading background hum, while your life moves to a rhythm they can't comprehend. Their attempts to unravel your path have only emphasized how far ahead you've traveled. Ironically, their opposition has made your glow impossible to ignore. Every insult became contrast. Every plot became a backdrop. And the climax they thought they were building, one where you would collapse under pressure, is being rewritten. It begins with a small break in their circle, a single voice, once complicit, now confused. A single question that wasn't supposed to be asked. And that one moment, quiet, unassuming, starts to undo everything they worked so hard to control. Sometimes all it takes is one unfiltered question to collapse a fortress built on performance. One moment of raw honesty. Why are they still the centerpiece of your conversations? And suddenly, the scaffolding starts to bend. The stories, the deflections, the carefully curated explanations no longer hold the same weight. And beneath all the justifications, something unavoidable starts to rise. The truth that they've been orbiting the very thing they claim to outgrow. People who've genuinely found peace don't wage mental wars in silence. People who've moved forward don't need an audience to affirm their movement. And those who've truly outgrown the past don't keep dragging it into every new room they enter. The realization doesn't arrive as drama. It settles in quietly, a clarity that can't be unthought. It becomes evident not because of what you've said, but because of the contrast between presence and performance. Their story was always about you, but the focus has shifted. Those who once listened out of curiosity are now paying attention for another reason: to understand the one who can't let go. The spotlight they once aimed outward has swung around. It's not just exposure, it's inversion. Everything they projected onto you is looping back like a mirror they can't escape. And while they were busy orchestrating your downfall, they unknowingly documented their own, page by page, until the final chapter revealed exactly who the story had been about all along. The chaos they hurled in your direction never broke you, it refined you. Each calculated strike became a lesson you didn't ask for, but absorbed anyway. Each time they hoped you'd fall, they unknowingly handed you the raw material for reconstruction. While they were attempting to dismantle you piece by piece, you were quietly rebuilding into someone their tactics could no longer reach. The blueprint they used no longer fits the structure you've become. The fragile character they tried to cast you as no longer exists. What once felt like survival has transformed into something far beyond endurance. It's turned into ascension. They wanted a downfall to point at, but ended up creating a figure that no longer bends under pressure. You've transcended the script, and now the outcomes beginning to take shape can't be ignored. The reality you're stepping into stands in direct contrast to the fantasy they've tried so hard to sell. While your world expands in direction and depth, theirs begins to cave inward. The patterns they tried to glue to your name now echo in their own experience. The silence they wished upon you begins to close in on them. And the very desperation they once projected outward has started to define their inner world. Their mirror has flipped, but they haven't noticed they're looking at their own reflection, chasing ghosts while you quietly become the life they never thought you'd claim. There's a cruel irony unfolding behind the scenes they carefully curated. The more energy they poured into erasing you, the more central you became. Every plotline, every conversation, every exaggerated tale placed you at the heart of their existence. While they aimed to shrink your presence, they unintentionally built their world around you. And the very outcome they feared most, your rise, became the backdrop of their slow unraveling. You were never meant to matter this much in their story. But now, without meaning to, they've made you the reference point for everything they do. The side character they tried to frame as irrelevant has become the anchor of their focus. And the people who once leaned in to hear their narrative are starting to shift uncomfortably. What once felt like entertainment now feels like exposure. Not of you, but of their obsession, their motives, and their fragility. Those they once counted on for backup are now walking away, not in silence, but with questions they never expected to hear. The allies they gathered are beginning to disband, recognizing they were pulled into a scheme fueled by bitterness rather than truth. One by one, the scaffolding collapses. What was once a campaign now looks like fixation. What was meant to tarnish your name is cementing your integrity. And what was built to isolate you is now isolating them. The collapse they tried to summon has arrived, but it showed up at their door instead. There's a rhythm to justice that doesn't miss a beat. The focus they aimed like arrows eventually bent in the direction from which they came. Their time, their words, their silent efforts to dim your presence, all of it circled back with perfect alignment. Every ounce of energy meant to fragment your foundation has begun quietly dismantling theirs. And while they remain distracted by trying to script your fall, their own script is unfolding in ways they never intended. The force they tried to weaponize against your stability is now folding into their own reality. But what they failed to see is that your evolution was never dependent on their permission. You've been rising outside their view, beyond the frame they tried to lock you into. What they meant to use as evidence against you has become the archive of your inner refinement. Their schemes didn't break you. They revealed the indestructible parts of you they were never meant to see. What began as an attack is now being interpreted as a rite of passage. Those who stood on the sidelines have watched your restraint become power, your silence become strength. And that strength has not hardened you, it has shaped you. You didn't grow in retaliation, you grew in revelation. And that contrast, their collapse beside your composure, has turned what was meant to be a takedown into your emergence. They tried to reduce your presence, but all they did was make space for your true form to take shape. They tried to mute your presence, unaware that their efforts would only sharpen it. What they meant as sabotage became the spotlight. Every attempt to frame you as irrelevant ended up framing you as unmistakable. And when the smoke cleared, what remained wasn't a defeated version of you. It was someone who had already outgrown the battlefield. Not because you won the fight, but because you rose far enough to render it meaningless. While they obsessed over narratives designed to damage, you were working silently in realms they couldn't perceive. Every slight was converted into strength. Every rumor refined your focus. And every time they attempted to reduce you, you created new space to expand. The people who once echoed their agenda are now quietly retracting, not out of guilt alone, but because they finally see where the truth has always been. Their stories no longer hold weight because the reality you've built speaks louder. The ones who judged from a distance now seek to understand up close. Those who once took sides are now stepping away from the noise, drawn toward the stillness you've earned. But even more powerful than what the world now sees, is what you now know. You've emerged from this not with scars, but with structure. Not with resentment, but with recalibration. You've been reshaped by forces meant to destroy you, and that's what makes you indestructible. Some people build entire realities around the idea of your downfall, and then find themselves stuck inside it. What they intended as a strategy became a cycle. The energy they spent watching, planning, and reacting never returned to them as strength. It returned as exhaustion. The version of events they curated with precision has twisted around them like a vine, casting them not as the victor they imagined, but as the one who couldn't stop looking back. What they accused you of, they now wear. What they pretended to be, you've become without trying. What's unfolded isn't revenge, it's evolution. You've moved into a space where their presence holds no power. They're still reacting to a past that no longer holds your shape. You're not waiting for them to fade. You've simply risen to a rhythm they can't hear, where the air moves differently and the lessons come from stillness, not survival. Their influence can't cross the threshold of the place you've arrived. And everything now unfolding in your life flows from a source they never accessed, governed by truths they never lived. Their efforts to define you have accidentally amplified you. The contrast made it obvious. While they unraveled, you aligned. Their fixation on your ruin has served as the unintentional spark that lit your return. You didn't just recover, you became refined. And now the story is rewriting itself in real time, revealing that their role was never the lead. It was a brief disturbance meant to redirect you inward, to unlock something dormant. The real twist? Their assault wasn't personal. It was cosmic design. They were just the pressure required to set your brilliance free. Some people aren't threatened by what you've done, they're shaken by what you represent. You triggered something they buried. Your rise disturbed the comfort of their complacency. Your stillness clashed with their need for noise. And your truth clashed violently with the identity they constructed to survive. They weren't attacking you as a person, they were striking at the reflection of everything they gave up on. You simply became the surface where their avoidance became visible. But reflections don't shatter under pressure, they clarify. And those who are anchored in their purpose can't be undone by someone else's confusion. You've shown what happens when someone refuses to internalize false labels. The silence you chose wasn't weakness, it was mastery. What they hoped would fracture you became the exact tension needed to reveal your integrity. And now, the weight they placed on you has slipped off, landing squarely in the life of the one who cast it. You've moved from self-protection to self-possession. You no longer waste energy correcting what was never your responsibility. Your presence says more than rebuttals ever could. You are no longer concerned with defending what's already evident. The manipulation that once triggered you now amuses you. The game they tried to play has no hold on you, because you're not even on the board anymore. You've become the reminder that power isn't something you demand. It's something you no longer need to prove. Sometimes, what was meant to halt you becomes the very momentum that carries you forward. The weight they placed on your name, the shadow they tried to cast, the schemes they couldn't stop feeding, none of it broke you. It animated you. Their obsession became the charge that powered your rise, their fixation the friction that awakened a deeper clarity. Without knowing it, they served the very purpose they feared, shaping the conditions that revealed your brilliance. Irony has a way of rewriting roles. The resistance they embodied became the contrast that made your expansion visible. What they believed would stain your path has only added dimension to your journey. Their attempts to collapse your world only made your emergence more cinematic, more earned, more unforgettable. They were never the destroyer, they were the necessary spark. And without realizing it, they contributed to a story where your growth could not be ignored. That chapter has closed. What they thought would be your unraveling was only the shedding of layers you no longer needed. You're not here because you fought harder. You're here because you transcended the entire framework. You no longer win by their rules. You're not just ahead, you're in another arena entirely. One where peace is power, stillness is strategy, and evolution is the only proof needed. What they started has ended, and what you've become is just beginning.